I've never shared this story before, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't think anyone would believe me. Now, I realize that if I keep silent, someone else might stumble across Sylvester Lake Cabin and go through the same hell I did. So, here it is. It all started when I inherited a small, rundown cabin from a distant relative. I didn't even know I had family out in that part of the country. The deed just showed up in my mailbox one day, along with a short note saying something like, "Use it, sell it, your choice." I thought it might be a quick way to make some cash, but I had no idea what was waiting for me out there. The drive to Sylvester Lake Cabin took me down miles of unpaved roads. By the time I finally saw the outline of the cabin, the sun was dipping behind the trees, and the sky was a deep orange. I pulled up, stepped out of my car, and just stared. The place looked ancient, like it hadn't been touched in decades. The paint was peeling, the windows were cloudy, and the surrounding forest practically swallowed it up. To top it off, there was no cell service. Perfect. But I figured I'd spend one night, maybe two, assess the condition and head back home to make a plan. Simple, right? When I first walked in, the air was stale and thick with dust. The wooden floor creaked under every step. The furniture was old, covered in sheets that were yellowed with age. A single overhead bulb flickered when I tested the light switch, but even that felt unsettling, like it was struggling to stay alive. After I opened some windows to air it out, I made a quick inspection. There was an old couch in the living room, a small kitchen with dated appliances, and two bedrooms down a narrow hall. I noticed something right away, a series of old photographs stacked on a side table near the couch. Most were black and white shots of a family, an older couple and two kids. At first glance, it was the typical family at a lake cabin stuff. But one picture made my heart skip. In the corner, half blurred and almost transparent, stood a little girl with her face twisted into an odd expression, like she was in the middle of a scream or maybe a laugh. It was disturbing. Then I found a brittle letter addressed to someone named Margaret. The handwriting was shaky, and the note said, "Margaret, you need to leave that place before it's too late. Do not ignore the tapping at the window. Night fell faster in those woods than I expected. Outside, crickets chirped loudly, and somewhere in the distance I could hear frogs croaking near the lake. It might have been peaceful, if I hadn't already felt like I was being watched." The cabin had a small fireplace, so I lit it for warmth and found a lantern in a closet. I sat on the couch listening to the crackle of fire and the relentless hum of insects outside. That's when I first heard it. Footsteps on the porch, soft, deliberate steps. I froze, my heart hammering. I pointed my flashlight at the window, but saw nothing but the reflection of my own panicked face. A quiet tap on the window broke the silence. 3 distinct taps. I jumped up, shining my flashlight again. Nothing. My breath was ragged, but I tried to convince myself it was just a branch swaying in the wind or some animal. Still, the memory of that letter, "Do not ignore the tapping at the window," kept looping in my head. Hours later, I climbed into the squeaky bed in one of the bedrooms. I left the lantern on the nightstand, its weak glow illuminating the corners of the room. Every few minutes, I thought I heard a faint rustling in the walls, maybe mice or raccoons. Old places have pests, right? Eventually, I drifted into a restless sleep until something jolted me awake. I heard low whispers outside my door. It sounded like 2 people talking, but I couldn't make out the words. My stomach twisted with fear. Still, I forced myself to check, clutching the lantern as I stepped into the hallway. But the moment I entered the living room, the whispers stopped. Complete silence. I went to the window, still locked. Then I noticed muddy footprints on the floor. They started near the window and ended abruptly in the middle of the room. No sign of whoever made them. The footprints were damp, and at the edges, they looked almost red. I felt physically ill. I backed up toward the wall, trying to steady my breathing. Had someone been inside the cabin? How did they vanish without a trace? I was considering leaving right then and there, but it was pitch black outside, and I was miles from any help. There was no phone signal. I'd have to wait until morning. Just as I made my way back to the bedroom, a soft humming drifted through the hallway. It was a lullaby, like one a mother might sing to a child. My skin crawled. I followed the sound to the second bedroom, its door partially open. I pushed it open, the hinges screeching. The humming stopped instantly, replaced by a deep silence. I flicked my flashlight around the room. Nothing. Then came the tapping again, this time on the bedroom window. I turned my flashlight to the window, and for a fraction of a second, I saw a face, a pale, small face with wide, unblinking eyes pressed against the glass. I stumbled backward with a gasp, dropping the flashlight. When I picked it up and looked again, the face was gone. Adrenaline surged through me. I frantically pushed an old dresser in front of the window, barricading the door, anything to feel safe. The letter's warning kept replaying in my mind. Move out before it's too late. I slumped against the wall in the living room, lantern by my side, afraid to close my eyes. Every so often I'd hear a creak or a gust of wind, and I'd tense up, expecting that horrible tapping again. My thoughts drifted to that family in the photos. What had happened to them? Who was that blurred girl? Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I dozed off, if only for a few minutes at a time. By the time dawn crept in, my lantern was almost out of fuel. Weak sunlight slipped through the cracks in the windows. I felt a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe with daylight I could leave safely. I gathered my bag and rushed outside to my car. The cool morning air felt safer than the darkness inside, but my hopes vanished when I saw the hood of my car was popped open. Inside, wires were severed, and the battery looked like it had been intentionally drained. My mouth went dry. Someone or something had sabotaged me. I saw footprints, bare human footprints, circling the car. They trailed off toward the lake. I felt torn between staying at the cabin, which seemed like a horrible idea, or trying to walk back to civilization. But with no cell service and little food or water, wandering blindly might be worse. I decided to head down to the lake, hoping there might be a shed with tools or maybe a boat, anything that could help me escape. The morning mist hung over the water, giving everything this eerie, dreamlike quality. Sure enough, there was a weathered wooden shed near the shore. The door stood slightly ajar. Inside, the stench of rotting wood nearly overwhelmed me. I found a small, moldy desk with water-damaged papers. One line in particular caught my eye. She drowned in the lake, restless spirit searching for the family that left her behind. My stomach knotted. Was this talking about that blurred girl in the photos, the one with the twisted face? I nearly jumped out of my skin as the shed door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, forcing it open again, only to see fresh footprints in the mud leading straight to the water. The prints ended at the lake's edge. I squinted through the mist, and then I saw it. A figure, waist deep in the water, facing away from me. Pale arms, thin hair clinging to its scalp. Slowly it turned around. The face was partly decayed, eyes filled with a hollow, childlike sadness. It opened its mouth, but no sound came out, just a ragged exhale. I didn't wait to see what it would do. I bolted back toward the cabin, fear pumping through my veins. I swear I heard splashing behind me and then footsteps on the shore, wet and frantic. I burst into the cabin, grabbed my car keys, and ran for the car. Even if the battery was drained, I had to try. I jammed the key into the ignition, turning it desperately. The engine sputtered, coughed, and refused to start. Tears of frustration threatened to break free. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw nothing. Had I lost it? Finally, the car roared to life with an angry lurch. I didn't question it. I slammed the car into reverse, backing away from the cabin. The last thing I saw as I pulled out was a small, pale figure standing between the trees, watching me with that same wide-eyed stare. As I tore down the dirt road, the adrenaline was so intense I almost forgot to breathe. But then, just before I cleared the tree line, I caught something in my peripheral vision. In the rearview mirror, for a split second, I saw the reflection of that same childlike face sitting in my back seat. I nearly drove off the road in panic. When I jerked my head around, the back seat was empty. I never went back for my things. For weeks, I was plagued by nightmares, dreams of muddy footprints, rotted cabins, and that horrifying face at my window. Friends started noticing I was distant, jumpy. How do you explain seeing the impossible? I did some research later on. Turns out a girl from the family who built Sylvester Lake Cabin drowned decades ago. There were rumors about the place being haunted, with locals swearing they've heard tapping on their windows at night. Most people just brushed it off as folklore. I can tell you now, it's anything but folklore. I'm begging you, if you ever come across that cabin or even think about going there, don't. If you hear tapping at your window in the middle of the night, don't ignore it. That restless spirit, or whatever it is, might not let you leave so easily. I don't expect everyone to believe me, but if you do yourself a favor and stay far away from Sylvester Lake. Because once it sees you, once it latches onto you, it may follow you everywhere you go. Thank you for listening to my story. If you ever encounter something like this yourself, trust your instincts and get out while you still can. And if you survived a similar experience, let me know in the comments. Because sometimes talking about it is the only way we can make sense of it.